Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I am Deborah Rue, and this is Human Potential at Work. And today I have returning guests, and I love these two women. I love them. Happen to be a mother and daughter team, but they've been on the show multiple times. I have Patti Ashley and I have Elizabeth Herman, and they have both been on the show before. And I'm going to let them reintroduce themselves in case you haven't seen the past shows. And what I'm going to do is we're also going to make sure that the links are provided so you can go back to the past shows. And I will let you know that I've already said before we've even begun the interview to go ahead and go back out and get on the show again, because I think that these women help bring some continuity into the conversations. And so I love their voices. And I think that I know that they make me feel a little better during these trying times. So, Patty, let's start with you. Remind us of who you are and your background, your book, and then maybe you can introduce Elizabeth a little bit, and then let Elizabeth also talk about her background more too.
Okay. Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having us, and thanks for that beautiful introduction. Oh my goodness, it just, that's why I do what I do is to hopefully touch a heart or two here and
Yes.
every now and then. So I appreciate that. And I am a psychotherapist and an author, and call myself an authenticity architect here in Boulder, Colorado. And my job is really to help people dig up their authentic self because we live in a world where we're taught to be a certain way, and as my teacher used to say, our job is to not to raise a carnation into a rose or a rose or into a carnation, but to raise that seed to its highest potential. So that really is my work, and I'm thrilled that my daughter Elizabeth gets to join us because now she's got a similar passion to make the world a better place. And as a school psychologist and a mom in the trenches, I really appreciate her sharing with us today. So.
I agree. Elizabeth, tell us more about your background, including she's a mom with a couple little kids.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of two really sweet. We've had a good couple days, so I feel like I can say they're sweet. It's been up and down though. I'm not gonna lie, but I have an almost 8 year old, so she'll be 8 next week, second grader, who's currently doing school virtually. And then I have a preschooler. Will be 4 in April, and he is going face to face to preschool with all the safety precautions in place. So we've been talking a little bit about how that's going. But I am a full-time school psychologist for a local public school district here in Virginia, where I've been for almost 10 years now here. And one of the things that I started doing a little bit on the side is working with parents, doing some parent coaching, because I noticed there was a need for that, especially parents of really young children. So before they're connected with the school system, kind of feeling overwhelmed. And I've done a few things with my mom too. We did before COVID, obviously, in-person get together with moms that we called Moms in Real Life. That was a lot of fun. And we've continued to do some things throughout the COVID shutdown of things. I'm not sure what to call it now. It doesn't feel like quarantine anymore, but whatever this messy middle is that we're in. And so she's been working on some virtual courses. So I worked with one of those with her that was related to parenting during the pandemic. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's this is I really believe, and I keep hearing experts talk about this as well. We really have to focus on self-care. And it's interesting working on self-care, certainly as an adult that's constantly traumatized. I'll tell you a stupid little story. And yesterday I was talking to somebody about, and I want to talk to you two about this, but the events that are happening in the United States over the last few weeks that are so frightening. And as I was just coincidentally, because I think the universe has a great sense of humor, they were saying, well, are you scared of such and such? And they talked about, what was happening in Washington, D.C. And as they said that, as I went to answer, an alarm went off on my phone in my ear. And I knew it was one of those warnings that you don't get very often. And it scared me. It startled me, but at the same time, it scared me too. I was afraid to look down and see what the message was saying. because, I never know these days what that message is going to be saying. It was saying that there was a gentleman that had gotten in trouble that was a senior citizen. So be on the lookout for it, which for this person to help them. And I'm so grateful that we do things like that we take care of seniors that get in trouble, and we take care of children that get lost or stolen or something. But it just reminded me that we are being collectively traumatized day after day after day after day. And my reaction, it made me sad because I was really alarmed. And then what happened was the phones around me started going off because, they're getting warned. Let's go and help this person. So we have to understand we are in a major, major collective trauma. And we are all walking major trauma. There was some pretty significant trauma in my extended family. And one of my sisters, unfortunately, has contracted COVID-19, and her son has it, and they're afraid her husband has it. And it's chilling to watch because you never know what COVID is going to do to you. So I just want to start once again by acknowledging we are all in some very collective trauma together. And I'm, the experts that I'm going to stay as, balanced as possible during this. Of course, walking this with my husband that's in late stage dementia, and he's so confused about what's happening, but so am I. So we are. So you can't blame it on his dementia. So once again, when I saw who my guests were today, I'm like, oh, yay. I get to have a counseling session on air. Yay. So no, just kidding, but a little bit. So we keep being told self-care. So I'm doing things like, and I've talked about this before, I'm being very conscious of drinking water. I've always been a good exerciser, but I got myself a Fitbit for Christmas. I got one for my daughter. So I'm eating carefully. I'm trying to stay away from the sugar, which is my go-to, but we're all in this. And so, and then we talked a little bit before we went on air about some comments we're hearing from our toddlers. And Elizabeth, you made some comments about, we talked about actually Doug Foresta, our, my producers. It was something his beautiful little 3.5-year-old was saying, but you said you're hearing some of the same things from your toddler and from others. And so why don't we start there? Because it's not just the adults in the room that are traumatized and terrified, and trying to manage this new, I don't know what it is. And as you said, Patti, okay, or no, it was you, Elizabeth, that said, was the pandemic, right? So I think there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Let me be quiet and give it to you, Elizabeth.
Well, no, I was just thinking as you said that, I think it's really important and refreshing to remind ourselves that it's not over. Like, I think we want it to be over so badly that I think sometimes we pretend like it's over when it's not. And one of the things in the conversations I've been having just with friends of mine about the reminders we all need that it's not over and things aren't normal yet, right? Like, not that they're ever normal. I know it's a strange word to use, but you know what I mean? Like, day to day, things aren't the way that they always were. So when we keep pretending like they are and try to go about our daily lives in the way that we used to before all of this, we feel really disconnected and even more stressed because we're trying to, I know, like for me working in public education, what I see every day is the teachers and just I've never seen teachers so burn out as I have this year. And they're working more than any human being should be working at any job, regardless of what you're being paid. And so
and
not
course,
even
they're being paid terribly
to begin with. Right.
Right.
And I think it just speaks to, those who are called to this profession and, how dedicated they are to it, and that we take advantage of that as a society in a way that we shouldn't. But, just that we can't keep expecting them to conduct business as usual when we're in the middle of a crisis. And I think that's what's been really hard to watch and experience for ourselves, with our own, and our children want it to be over. Like we were talking about, like at our house, it's the germs with my preschooler. He refers to it as the germs, because that's what we kind of explain when things first closed about why he couldn't go to school, because the germs, and we have to be careful and keep everybody safe. And the other night he said to me, but it's taking so long. And I said, I know it is. It really is. We just have to be patient. He's like, I've been waiting and waiting. And it's tough for them, but it's also tough for us. So that's where I feel like, step one of self-care is just acknowledging that it's hard and it's not supposed to feel the way it used to in the best of situations. So
I agree. And that's beautifully said. And once again, this is why, that's why I think the work that both you and, Patti are doing, it's so important right now, because I think you're right. We keep wanting to normalize it because that's what we do as human beings. But then you're like, no, wait a minute, I don't want to normalize this, but we all are still walking paths, we're having, and I keep saying this on air, that you don't know what somebody else is experiencing. If somebody cuts you off in traffic, it might be, you just don't know, but just assume people are walking really, really traumatic things. And even if they are not being hit with something, like my sister has COVID and my nephew now, and my husband's dementia is so advanced now and scary and beautiful along the way as well. I mean, he's seeing people in the forest. And there's something beautiful and magical, like the universe is preparing him and us, but at the same time, it is so intense for all of us. And Patti, I know that, you and Elizabeth both are trying to help moms and individuals. And Patti, how in the heck do we even be authentic during these times?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like I love what Elizabeth said, is the first part is to just acknowledge that this isn't normal. And the thing that that keeps coming through my mind is this normalizing the abnormal. We're trying so hard to find normal. Where is normal? Everybody talks about the new normal and what is normal, but I don't think really that word is just odd in itself, because what is normal? And I think that unfortunately the normal has been to minimize our emotional self. And really that's what my work is about, is to let's talk about the emotional piece, which is really what's impelling a lot of what's going on. I mean, when I looked at I was stunned last Wednesday, watching what was happening in the Capitol building. And I wrote a blog on that, like normalizing the abnormal, because I watched those people up, I woke up in the morning, like, how long did they stay to finish this process? And it was like close to 4 a.m. And all I wanted them to do was go home and hold their family. I just wanted them to go home and hug their loved ones and say, I'm safe. And yet at the same time, I applaud the fact that they were able to stay and get the job done. Yay. Because that's a whole different message. However, we don't really talk much about the trauma, like you said, Deborah. It's primary trauma, it's secondary trauma. Is there tertiary trauma?
There will be now, right?
Long-term trauma, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, many people have suffered. I have my chief information officer, Nabil Eid. He lives in Syria. And people are like, well, you should move. Well, this is his country. He doesn't want to move. He wants to help. He doesn't want to, not to mention, you don't have the options to just leave when you live in Syria. So there are a lot of people that have been living with this collective long-term trauma. And now we all are joining it, right, Patti? So, yeah.
And so the emotions that are underneath all that are something that we don't really have in our vocabulary. I think Brene Brown did a great job of bringing language to shame and vulnerability, and people go, oh, that's what I'm feeling, And yet there's this fear. What I find in my work with my clients, and especially my, young adult girls that I work with that are in college, there's so much shame around feeling bad because they've got this constant message to feel good and to get over feeling bad. And so I think the coronavirus and the pandemic and all that's going on right now has given us this opportunity of being in a place of we feel bad, and what do we do with that, and where's the language for that, and how do we hold each other through that, and how do we talk about that instead of let's try and make it all normal again. Let's it's gone on for way too long, as a we live in a logical scientific world, and yet our emotional self is really what runs the show. But if we don't acknowledge it, the shadow aspects take over, and things like what happened at the Capitol building happen, and things like all of our systems struggling with overcapacity and the inability to know how to move through it. And so it's just, that's how, and to answer your question, how do you be authentic? It's giving yourself permission to all feelings are okay, but all behavior isn't, and to find ways to move through, recognize and express those feelings. And I don't think we need people in our lives who can witness that for us. And that's challenging when it's such a brand new thing. I always say it's brand new, hot off the press, right? It's never been done before.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. And it's interesting using the word normal, because I haven't been using the word normal since my daughter with Down syndrome was born, because I was very quickly taught by society that she wasn't normal. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I don't want to be normal. Who's normal? I'm not normal. I have gray hair and gray and purple hair, because I don't want to be normal. And I remember one time she said to me, which really made me nothing like learning, but she said, "Mom, I'm normal. Stop treating me like I'm not normal." And I'm like, you don't want to be normal. But it's interesting, because you talked about it a little bit, and even Elizabeth did, but our language doesn't have the right words to hold what we're walking. And I also want to go back to something Elizabeth said, because I'm one of those people, Elizabeth, that, and I even talked to Doug about this. I forced Doug to be my counselor. He is actually a licensed counselor, but but I don't know why I had this delusion, but I did. Well, I just sort of thought, oh, yay, I'm so glad 2020 is going to be gone. And yay, 2020. And I knew it wasn't going to just magically get better. But at the same time, I was disappointed that the day that I actually started really, really sort of working, it happened to be on January 4th. I happened to that day talk to about 8 different people in the United Kingdom, because I do a lot of work in the United Kingdom, and most of them were in London. They were so traumatized because they went into a major lockdown in the UK. And it's through the beginning of March, and they were so traumatized. And then I became traumatized for them. And I realized that somehow I had that a little delusion that here's the first day of 2021. Woohoo. Oh, wow. So glad 2020 is behind us. But so
I think that's part of that new year, new you, right? That silliness around, right? Like, which is, I feel like we could unpack that too, like the whole wellness industry and the push. This phrase that I've really appreciated lately, that's especially right now, is toxic positivity, where we're like kind of almost like putting filters on everything to make them shiny and pretty, and saying, just choose joy. And I think, and to me, that's always just not sat well to me, because I think that's kind of insulting to tell somebody to choose joy when they're not truly, like, again, authentically feeling that in that moment. It dismisses any authentic feeling or opportunity to really feel. And I kind of, in my experience working, especially with high schoolers, kind of like my mom, Patti, was saying about the young adult women, I feel like they're growing up in that culture of social media messaging that's very consumer driven, and pushes that wellness lifestyle that is, I think, very toxic as far as not allowing that authenticity to break through, because they're trying to sell you wellness a lot of times, unfortunately. And I think it's hard for, young adults and adolescents to understand the difference between being sold something and something that's really helpful and well, you know what I mean? I don't know. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Mom or Deborah, on that, but I just think that's something that's very in our faces. And I think in the pandemic, that choose joy mentality is just really, especially with the new year, right? New year, new you. Whereas I think a lot of us are like, well, New Year saved me. Maybe it's a nice, everyone likes a chance to reflect, right? I think it's a good pause point where we can kind of stop and reflect on things that have happened, things, goals, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But I think really, again, being a little more authentic with that is important.
Yeah, and Patty, I want to turn that over to you because I think that's a really brilliant point. Many brilliant points Elizabeth made, but I'm one of those people. Elizabeth, that I'm obnoxiously optimistic, and life has beat some of the optimism out, but the way I've navigated my life, especially the trauma of my earlier life, the sexual abuse and everything, the mental abuse, the physical abuse, was by finding the silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I only say toxically. I only say it that way because I think you're right, because then you start messing with that authenticity. Am I being authentic? Because I
think it's
really
putting that shine. Yeah. Trying to put a shine on something without really digging in and saying, but what am I really feeling here? Right. And then growing from it. Right. Because what you're describing is resilience, in the face of something difficult, and resilience takes moving through it, not just putting a shiny varnish on it. Right. And then pretending like everything's okay. So yeah, I think, there's definitely a difference there, but I think starting to kind of look at that a little bit when we're consuming media messages, right? And what is that message here to tell me?
Yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that's such a good point, Elizabeth. And, it is this, that you were describing that, what I see is these girls trying to have a look, an image, an idea of something that looks good on the outside. But again, that's what I'm talking about normalizing the abnormal. We're trying to make something normal, but we're negating to look at our emotional self. I mean, our right brain develops first. That's our sensory feeling brain, and that helps us feel safe in the world, but we really haven't paid much attention to that until recently. And then our left brain is our logic and our reason, and that's where we get into this. And I think that's what happens with this toxic positivity, or I'm a big fan of positive thinking and what is it, law of attraction, and I believe in all that. And I also believe in, we have to address the emotional self too. It's both and that's what makes us whole. That, in the Kahlil Gibran poem, Joy and Sorrow, he says, what is it, which is better, or joy or sorrow? And he says neither. They both, are two sides of the same coin. And I think paradox is the word that I use a lot. And I think that's the biggest lesson we have, is how do we embrace paradox, two opposites that exist together. And so, yes, positive thinking and affirmations and all of that, gratitude, positive psychology talks about gratitude practice. We have to do that to give messages to our nervous system and our right brain. We don't want to ignore the fact that sometimes we have to also embrace the suck at the same time, as Brene Brown would say, embrace the suck. So that's where we really run into trouble, is we try and split. We want to, I want to feel all good and I want to be positive and I don't want to deal with this stuff over here. But Carl Jung, psychologist, says, what we resist persists and often grows stronger. And so that's what I notice in my work, and back to the authenticity, is allowing for all feelings to move through us. And that's how we get through them, instead of trying to push them over to the side or shove them down. That's when they go in the shadow. And that's when the shadow takes over and does, reactive kinds of things that really are not productive.
And what I wonder is, what are our children learning? And before I'm going to pass this back to Elizabeth, and then I want to hear from you too, Patty. But what I sometimes wonder is, you have to learn, one thing that we have to learn is how to self-care, self-soothe, take care of ourselves, as at all ages. And what are our young ones learning from this? I know I will never be the same after this experience. And I really believe I'm a better person now. But I also want to let you know that I want to acknowledge in this conversation that um, my family, like many American families, just looking at this from an American view for a second, United States view, we're divided because there, for example, there are five of us that grew up together as siblings, and three of us voted for Biden, and two of us voted for Trump. I did not, would never, ever. Sorry. So sorry, but the recent thing that happened at the Capitol and our Senate buildings and the horrible things that happened could have been so much worse. Optimist in me, but it has caused more division in our family, and that I hate. And I was able to break down some of the barriers with one of my sisters, but one of my sisters is not speaking to me anymore. And I understand. I love her enough that if I need to be the villain in her life because I believe different things politically than her, but this is happening even worse again. And that of course impacts the children and us all trying to navigate it. So Elizabeth, maybe you can take this, and Patty, you can also chime in.
Yeah, one of my favorite just like visual illustrations of sort of what we're talking about is in the Pixar movie Inside Out. There's the characters that represent emotions. So there's joy and sadness and disgust. So there's a point there where joy is trying to distract sadness from like going off the cliff with the imaginary friend. And because the imaginary friend is realizing that like they're not necessary anymore and they're about to go into the forgotten part of the brain. And so joy is trying to say, oh, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Remember, we were happy. And sadness just sits down next to the friend and like puts her arm. And then the first time I watched that with my daughter, I was like, oh, she's sitting with the sadness. Like it just made me so happy inside because I had never seen that illustrated for children before, that you have to sit with your sadness and that's okay. And it's so important. And one of the things I notice is we don't let kids sit with discomfort as parents, and we don't want them to be uncomfortable. Because it makes us uncomfortable, because then again, going back to like all the history of trauma, right? It triggers our own things. And so we resist it so much, and we try to like, well, here's a snack, or here's a screen, or here's a thing. And so we, again, like want to distract from the feeling instead of sitting in the feeling. And I know, like for me as a parent, and when I'm working with children in schools or partnering with parents, I mean, I feel like there's nothing you can do better than just sitting in that emotion that your child is in with them, and not trying to shape it for them or tell them, define it for them in a way that's not really where they are, and just be in it, especially during this time, because we have had a lot of feelings, like a lot of people, right? A lot of feelings. And again, my children are pretty young, so we don't have the news on, so they don't really know necessarily what's going on politically. Obviously, they know there was an election, and we talk about that pretty openly, but things like an insurrection, we don't really bring up with our three-year-old, but it's important to know that like people are angry, right? That people are upset about what's happening. And, when decisions are made, not everyone agrees with the final decision. And it's important to talk about, well, how do we handle that? Like how do we handle when we're not happy with the way things are going? I mean, children understand that better than most people. And just allowing time to process through that, because again, when you rush to kind of fix it, to fix the feeling, it doesn't give them time. And I've noticed, I think children move through feelings a lot faster when you just give them space to sit in it rather than try to rush them through it, is kind of, what I've noticed. And I think, there's a lot of, just things that we know now about the brain and how we need to kind of give them space. And, one of, someone I read a lot about parenting talks a lot about let the feelings be, which is like one of my favorite phrases to use, just let the feelings be. And I just think that's really important for all of us.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Elizabeth. I think that I know I haven't, and maybe I can use the excuse that I have ADHD but I don't. Instead, what I've always done is try to find something to distract myself and my children. And so I think what we're going to learn now is how to really do this. Patty, I don't know if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, and it's very well said, and it's kind of related to what I was saying about go home and be with your family, after the trauma at the Capitol building. I thought about that, about all the school shootings that were happening before COVID. God knows, let's hope we don't have a school shooting now that kids are going back to school again. But there were many school shootings happening, and we were sort of again normalizing the abnormal. It's like, oh, this is tragic. There's another school shooting. No, let's let's give the teachers guns to fix the problem. No, let's talk about the problem. Why are there people that are so angry that they are doing these atrocities? That's the part that we don't talk about. That's the feelings that got shoved down and come out in the shadow. So with our kiddos today, I think what Elizabeth said is such a good point. It's how do we be with the feelings? And I think, we, as parents, we tend to want to fix things. And I remember, so I studied with Catherine Kersey at Old Dominion when Elizabeth was young, and my children were like, my guinea pigs in the laboratory, where I was learning all this stuff and trying new things. But the one thing that she would say was, you have to validate their feelings, reflectively listen. And so, I remember, like with Elizabeth, one of the things that happened was the little boy next door, I'm sure you don't remember this, was like cheating on a board game or something you were playing. And so I wanted to go over and talk to the parents and say, your son is a cheater. But instead, I just reflected back. Well, that's really hard. Oh my gosh, what is it like to feel that he's cheating? And I don't know if you remember that or not. And I probably wasn't that good at it because it took me years to learn. I mean, that's the other thing. It takes years to learn. I call my work authenticity architecture because I think it's like remodeling or building a house. And I have a client who's an architect. And I said, just time-wise, how long does it take to do that? And she said 2 to 3 years. So I thought, we really have to give ourselves this 2 to 3 years to recreate a sense of self that really has these parts that have been cut off for so long, and to give ourselves that grace and unconditional positive regard in the process. And I think that's what sometimes blocks the processes, because we think, oh, I'll never get there. So we go back to hear what's familiar, which is trying to fix the problem, come up with a solution, ease the pain. But what Elizabeth and I are saying is, how do you be with all feelings, and how do you validate that for the kids? And that's how they move through them, and that's how they feel better. And like Elizabeth said, there's a lot of feelings going on. And we're all having a lot of feelings. And, I think that the thing about our feelings and uncomfortable feelings is we're so afraid that we're going to get lost in this dark hole and never get out. And of course that can happen in extreme cases, but for the most part, it really is what gets you through. And you just, again, need supportive people in a container, a way to hold that difficult emotion. My client yesterday was saying, oh, I hate to cry. I don't want to cry. I just don't want to cry. And I said, well, I'm a big fan of crying. So, it's detoxing when the tears come. And so she says, okay, when I get off the phone, I'll go cry in the shower.
When it's acceptable, when it's socially acceptable to cry.
Yeah. Nobody else sees the tears.
I cried a lot in 2020, and I decided one night, because I don't know about you two, but I know so many people, including myself, that's really struggling to sleep now. I know 3 o'clock in the morning, and I know 4 o'clock in the morning, and I know it very well. I know it's amazing. It's amazing how little sleep you can get by on for how long. It's just amazing. And I always find it fascinating because it impacts my ability to pull certain words from my mind, which I'm over a certain age anyway. So, but it's just fascinating. And the self-care, I think, is so interesting. And I don't think we're doing a good job. I think you two are doing a good job at it, but I think as a society, I think a lot of people don't even know what that means anymore. Self-care. And I love the point you made, Elizabeth. I made a little note to myself to watch that cartoon again, Inside Out, because I loved it when I saw it years ago, but sitting with their feelings. I had said this when I talked to y'all before, that one time Marianne Williamson had said to somebody, they said, well, I went to the doctor to get a drug, get some prescription drugs, because I was afraid if I didn't get help that I was just going to stay in bed for weeks and cry. And Marianne said, well, so what's wrong with staying in bed for a few weeks and crying? Because you have a real traumatic thing that has happened to you in this particular thing. And my thinking, in 2020, I did let my tears flow, but then I thought, in the middle of the night, I thought, well, maybe in 2021, it is still okay to cry, but I decided that I'm going to see if there's also an opportunity when I'm feeling that to channel that in some way. I didn't explore it as much in 2020 because it was so traumatic on so many levels. And so this year I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe you can cry if you want to, but maybe there's an also opportunity here for you to explore, what are you feeling? So I was just wondering.
That's the
Go ahead.
paradox. That's the paradox again, Deborah, that I'm talking about, because I think that's, again, we think if we don't want to keep crying, we don't want to keep crying, we don't want to keep crying, but then we don't really understand how to hold other things as well while we're crying, because we want to split it off. And so, it's really about emotional safety. That's what this is all about. There's the ding, 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 ding in the body that I am not emotionally safe. So when you're crying, sometimes it's then to cry and find that's the container of emotional safety. Like, you can be crying and grieving and sad, and also then hold the grace of the gratitude for things that are going well. So you tell the body, I'm safe. At the beginning of the pandemic, I said, okay, everybody find five, fantastic five. What are five things right now that are comfortable? Your pet, your blanket, the sun is shining, birds are singing, because that's happening at the same time the tears are happening. And you need to remind the body of that. But the thing is, when we go into those gratitude practices, we think that we have to be there and not in the tears. So the tricky, hard part of embracing paradox, which is the biggest lesson I think we have on the planet, is that both exist together. And so we can hold both, grief and grace together.
Yeah, well said. Now, I know you and Elizabeth have done some virtual courses, and I was wondering if you wouldn't, only because I really like to give practical solutions. And I know you and Elizabeth have both given us some really practical solutions. And I do want to say to you, Patti, that I think you did a really good job with your children, if Elizabeth is any indication. Just saying.
They're awesome. They are pretty awesome.
Wow, compliments. But are there any courses that you and Elizabeth are offering right now that people can join? And because I think one thing that a lot of my friends have talked to me about recently is, okay, we get it. It's not going to end tomorrow. This is long term, but people are searching for something to give them some balance. So I was wondering if y'all wouldn't mind talking about a little bit about what you're doing, but also other tips as well, and other tips when we pass it to Elizabeth, that you're offering to the parents and the children that are coming to you as well. So let me give it to you, Patti, and then we'll toss it to Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, the course that Elizabeth and I did, Moms in Real Life, is on both of our websites, the link, and it's a online course that people can do on their own, and has PowerPoints and videos and meditations and worksheets, and it really is do at your own pace. You can also contact Elizabeth or myself if you have questions or you want to know more about specific pieces. But Elizabeth did great. She did a whole section on what was it called? Screen time.
Mm-hmm.
And because my thought was kids are on screens all day long, and what's that effect? And Elizabeth took it even to this part of it, the emotional self, like how do parents handle their emotions? How do we help our kids handle our emotions? So she has a great PowerPoint on that, and we've got some videos to go with. So, and that's what we're doing. We're both available for individual consults. And I haven't told Elizabeth this yet or invited her yet, but I'm doing, because my latest book was on shame informed therapy, and I think a lot of what we're talking about is core shame, and the neurobiology of shame is very much like trauma, and then there's feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not emotionally safe, and so my work has really evolved into that, and so I've been doing some Facebook Live series on shame, and I want to do a mom shame one in May, Elizabeth. I was going to ask you if
That's good.
so mark your calendar.
Go ahead, say no on air. Go ahead.
Like Mother's Day weekend, because mom shame is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's this idea of, this mother has got it all figured out, or this mother does it better than me. And again, we are not talking about the fact that, that was my first book, Living in the Shadow of the Too Good Mother Archetype, based on my experiences of women coming to me, while I was a parent educator and then later a therapist, saying, I can't get this parenting thing right, but they don't want to tell anybody else about it because of the shame. And so, again, normalizing the abnormal, we try and make it all look pretty on the outside, but on the inside, it's hard. And so what do moms tend to do is they project to the other moms, and they start shaming other mothers, because look at what she's doing as a mom. So that's what I want to do, Elizabeth, by the way. That's that's my new plan.
Count me in, Mom.
And you'll have to give us a link so that we can share it with the audience too. But Elizabeth, let's turn the mic to you.
Yeah. So, I think we talk a lot about, how we like raise empathetic and kind kids, right? Because we're thinking about the future and this world, how we move away from kind of these systems of oppression that we have, and how we move, get away from bullying and all of these big systemic things that we want to cure as a society. And we want to build empathy, really. I feel like that goes to the root, right? Like we want to grow empathetic children. But I think as parents, it's so important that we remember we can't teach children something that we aren't modeling. And if we're not modeling empathy, not for others, which is also important, but also for ourselves, by showing them, like I make a really big point of telling my kids, like, that right now is my time to go have some time, like to go read by myself, or this is my time for me to have. And I think it's so important. And that we talk a lot about that at bedtime, is, especially my older child, I parented all day today. So I'm done. I'm clocking out. This is your time to, you could, if you want to read in your bed, if you want to relax, but this is your time to be here in your safe space, so I can go have some time to myself, and, and my husband, I can have some time to, check in and hang out, because we're done parenting for the day. We clock out at 7:30 every night, done. Like, it's done. Parenting time is over. It's time for kids to be in their beds. And I just think you can't show them that they're important if you don't show them that you're important, right, to yourself. I just think there's so much going on there.
But Elizabeth, I never did that. I always thought my job was, that is very deep. Doug Forrest in the background said that's deep. And I agree, because of, my parents did the very best they could. And I am the person I am because of, my childhood. But I thought that I had to give everything to my kids and tell them I loved them. And I think sometimes I confused them, and I think we did confuse the kids. So that is so powerful. And it's just not something, I just wanted to acknowledge that's not something I knew to do. And that's brilliant. And actually, that's something that I think I'm going to use with my husband right now with his dementia, because of course he's going backwards. It's almost like sometimes it feels like, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, I mean it in a way to try to understand. Sometimes I do have toddler behavior. Mm-hmm. And so so that I just wanted to acknowledge that. So
that's a lot of caregiving, and caregiving it depletes you because you're giving, and you can't give what you don't have. And so you just have to, I just feel like there's nothing more important that parents can do than show their children that they value themselves.
Oh, so powerful. Very powerful. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's just, I wish I'd known that, but my kids did good. And I was always very authentic with them and telling them, well, I don't know everything. I'm doing my best here, and so that made them more empathetic children. Both of my adult children are very empathetic adults, but that's very, very powerful. I just wanted to acknowledge that, but I know, go ahead.
It's interesting
Go
too,
ahead.
generationally, which is why I love working with Elizabeth so much. Not only that I just love my daughter, but the
Why?
the changes in the generation. So I, raised my kids in the 80s, and that was right after the feminist movement, and that was right when women were starting to actually pay attention to child development and our emotional self. And so, but we were all just learning it. And so what did we do in my generation is we overgave to our kiddos because we wanted to be sure that they got all the I'm going to say a bad word, all the stuff that we didn't get because our parents didn't know about that. So we wanted to be sure to give, but we forgot, we skipped ourselves. So then in Elizabeth's generation, because they got so much, even though, and I'm not sure that, Elizabeth, I have to say in our family, we had divorce and trauma and hard stuff, and they had to learn that. So, my process was learning to do all the stuff that we're talking about is I can't fix it. I can't make it better. And it's really hard to watch. And at the same time, she's in a generation that has learned about, I have to take care of myself. It's not selfish. So I think integrating those parts is really brand new and difficult, but I love what she said because it's so true. I can't be a good mom until I'm a good parent to myself. I mean, Bruno Bedelheim, a well-known child psychiatrist, said that. He said, we have the job of learning how to discipline ourselves and our kids at the same time because we're learning so many new things. And we have to be kind and realize that, none of us are going to get it right. We're all going to mess up, and it's a learn on the job as we go. And I used to always say, too, I became a parent educator because I believe in reincarnation, and I'm hoping like 5 generations down the road, maybe we'll have it figured out and I'll be born into that family. But I don't think that there's any quick fix or any easy solution. I think it's really being able to be with what is, and it is messy. Feelings are messy, and we have to love ourselves and each other through that.
Well said. Beautifully said. I love talking to you and Elizabeth, and I always learn so much. And so I know my audience, just from the sheer numbers of them that are listening to these episodes, love it as well. But we are out of time again. So, and I've already said, please go out and get on the calendar again, because I know I love these two brilliant women. And that was such a great point you made, Patti, about the generations learning together. But I want to make sure, though, always that the audience knows how to get in touch with both of you. So, Patti, let's start with you and give your website and any social media, and then turn it over to Elizabeth, because once again, we'll provide the links. If you ever want to get hold of them and you can't remember how to, always come to me. I'll send you to them. Obviously, I'm a gigantic fan of both of these amazing women. But Patti, let's start with you.
Thank you, Deborah. It's so delightful to be with you as well. And my contact info is easy. It's my name, which is Patti with an I, Patti Ashley at, actually, my website is Patti Ashley. What is my website? .com.
I think it's just pattyashley.com. Yeah.
So I was trying to I was going
totally
to
get this. We totally get this.
My email, which is also Patti Ashley. It took me a long time in my career to actually get my domain name and my email name, all just my name. And anyway, so I was heading into email territory, but my website is pattyashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. And all the links to the courses that we're talking about, lots of the videos, like our videos are on there, my books. I'm actually upgrading my website, trying to make it all look not so cluttered because there's a lot on it. I also do shameless Facebook Friday Lives. I was doing it every week, but I'm going more to like every other week because it's a lot. And I'm doing one this week with my friend Billy Ortiz, who's a dream worker. We're going to talk about dreams and visions for 2021. And then I'm going to start a shameless Facebook Live series on sex, relationships, and shame in February. And then Elizabeth and I, if she agrees, are going to do one on mom shaming in May.
For Mother's Day.
Yeah. So there's a lot, and you can pretty much find it all on my website, pattyashley.com.
Thank you, Patti. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I have a website also. It's Elizabeth Ashley Herman. .com. And yeah, and I'm currently in the trenches of the public school system, so I'm not doing too much private work right now, but when summer comes around and I don't work full work weeks is usually when I do a little more. And hopefully, again, I'm on the list with all the other educators to get the vaccine in the next round. So my fingers are crossed that that'll happen and we can start to move into hopefully a new phase of this. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter, because she's in a supported apartment, she's also on the list. Healthcare workers, teachers first, and then she's in the next round. So, and normally I'd be nervous, but I don't want my daughter to get COVID. It's, anyway, it's in God's hands, but we're doing what we can. But Elizabeth and Patti, thank you both. Thank you for all your work. And I think this is how we move forward, is we help each other move forward. We had Doug Foresta talking in the background, but the reality is this is how we do it. We help each other move forward and we take away the shame and we use the resources that, both of you are, have provided. So thank you for your work. And thank you to the audience that follows this. I hope you like what we're talking about. I am actually talking about things that interest me. But I know from your comments that people are really enjoying these shows. So thank you both. Thanks to Doug Foresta and Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye,
Happy New Year
everyone.
to you, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.